Welcome to another edition of CoreNet Mid-Atlantic Chapter's CoreNet Café. My name is Katie Redmond. I am a Senior Director with JLL's IPS Integrated Portfolio Services Group, and I'm also your Chapter Treasurer. So I'm really thrilled to have with me this morning Haley Nelson from HGA.
Yeah, good morning, Katie.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we'll take you over in the next 30 minutes. We're going to learn a little bit more about Haley, how she got to where she is. We're going to talk about lots of different topics around reentry, workplace strategy, and talk about some really interesting research that HGA has been doing. So let's start by getting to know Haley. So, Haley, can you tell us a little bit about your role with HGA and your career path?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a senior interior designer with HGA. I joined about 8 months ago when I relocated from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. So I know the Mid-Atlantic well. It's near and dear to me. But I focus on workplace design and growing our public corporate practice in LA. And I've really spent my career designing spaces that help people thrive at work. Well-being in the workplace has been a real passion of mine because we spend so much of our lives working. And before the pandemic, that primarily happens in an office, but no matter where it's happening, it's really astonishing to me that as little as 15% of us are engaged in our work, and burnout is on the rise. So that's why bringing out the best in people and designing spaces to combat those statistics is really important to me.
So I can tell you love what you do and that your journey has taken you on some adventures in cross country. So before we get into some real workplace discussions, for our young leaders who are in the audience, can you share a little bit about, how you navigated this part of your career, how you got to where you are now? What advice do you have for our young leaders?
Yeah, sure. This may seem to go against what I just said about burnout, but my advice is to say yes to a lot of different things. Be curious and really explore different perspectives, especially early in your career, to really find the spot that makes you happy and fulfilled. It expands your network inside your company and outside. But I would say that I got to where I am, by having a can-do attitude, really focusing on exploring, but also kind of coalescing around a few themes that interested me the most. And for me, as I mentioned, it's, using design to bring out the best in people, but also advocating for healthier and sustainable materials. But I will note that boundaries are important, and it's really important to find the balance in being, sort of up for anything and then not stretching yourself too thin.
So good advice. So we'll make sure to share this with our young leaders as well. That's a good segue into the conversation. So I know as we were kind of preparing, we talked about reimagining the workplace and some predictions for what's happening next, but also fundamentals that are going to stay the same. This concept of workplace strategy, of sustainability, wellness in the workplace, all those sorts of things. So can you talk a little bit about that and kind of share your perspectives?
Yeah, this moment in time provides such a unique opportunity to take a collective pause, to really decide if the way that we did things before was serving us well. If it's, something that we want to continue, or if it's a moment to sort of reassess and figure out what the new, future could be, even, despite pandemic. At HGA, we surveyed over 3,500 workers representing 13 industries, about their experiences working from home, but also their perspectives on going back to the office. And we gathered this in a way that was allowed us to collect quantitative but also qualitative data. So, we really tried to get a full picture of what was happening. And we developed 5 core insights. The first one, I'm so sorry for all this background noise. I thought I turned off all those alerts. The joys of the authenticity of working from home, right?
We're all living it.
No, but the 5 core insights that we developed. The first one was leadership. It's really about the license to author my own workday and the trust required to do it. The second one is quality, which really is about replacing stressful aspects or things that were sort of in tension with more delightful things, things that maybe will serve us a little bit better. The third is fellowship. And this is really the essence of collaboration and the thing that people miss the most about going back to the office. The fourth is membership, and this is really around the need for face time in order to get your work done, and that sort of club that may form, with sort of that group that requires that more often. And then the fifth is resilience, and this is really adapting to the future, whether that's on a personal level and strengthening our personal resilience, and also organizationally, sort of the big wake-up call, that it may not be this that repeats itself, but something else is going to come along the line. And so how can we kind of build that resilience?
So, let's explore a little bit. There's something that we talked about earlier, that kind of difference. Every employee in an organization is coming to this current way of working from a different place. They may have a different home environment. They may have a different a way of working, different responsibilities within the organization. Can you talk a little bit about how to kind of level set that from a workplace strategy perspective? How do you take this new normal and find recommendations that will suit sort of a diverse population of people?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think in a lot of ways, this kind of experiment that we're all living of, especially when at the onset, of kind of this shift to working from home, in a way, it did sort of level the playing field in terms of allowing access in the same way or a similar way to different people across an organization. And kind of tangential to that, what's interesting about that membership insight that I mentioned was that we were seeing a disconnect when it came to different levels in the organization. And as you move higher in the organization, the preference and dependence on the workplace also increased. And so, the individual contributors are, really, faring well and really enjoying that choice and control over the work environment. But there's, this real opportunity then, because the sort of leaders of the organization are missing that face-to-face time. They're also reporting that they aren't as connected with what's happening, in the sort of day-to-day, the pulse of the company. So, there is a real opportunity to try to level that a little bit better. And so I think in returning to the workplace, sort of imagining what this new future would look like, I think that that insight around membership is really important, because if those leaders are the ones that, maybe want to get back sooner, sort of get back into whatever that new phase looks like. There is that, maybe caution of it forming this club. Those like highly motivated, team members want to be a part of that, want to have access to leadership. And so they're going to want to get back to the office as well. And so what happens to those that maybe can't get back as soon as others, maybe because the kids aren't going back to school, they're not able to, recommit to the same types of schedules and all of that. So it's just an interesting point. I think it's going to be very different for every company, but I think it's something to keep in mind, and just sort of watch that sort of nuance of human behavior and how that might impact the office.
So that power of choice is going to look different for different employees, different employers. I know HGA works with a range of different organization types. So is there anything that stands out, one sector over another, that seems to be embracing a more flexible work from home policy? Any comments on the different types of industries that you work with at HGA?
Yeah, for me personally, I've been working a lot with the tech industry in LA and Southern California, and so it's been really actually refreshing to kind of see the more cautious but thoughtful and humanistic approach to sort of getting back, and that it's not the sort of knee-jerk reaction of kind of having to get to a solution quick. It's a little more of the wait and see, which has been kind of nice, because I think, it ties into a lot of what, we're finding around this idea of quality. And honestly, that was one of the more interesting things that came out of our survey to me, that people are able to really kind of understand the importance of the quality of their work environment. So, one kind of tidbit of that is that, people reported being able to enjoy higher quality breaks that they didn't feel guilty taking. They're taking, more frequent and diverse breaks, kind of doing different activities, and they felt like they could really unplug versus even at the office, when there are a lot of, amenities and these, spaces that are rich with ways to support taking a break, people still said that they felt on, that there wasn't this true disconnect. So I think, for me, it just makes me really happy that everyone's seeing that benefit to their psychological well-being, that they can really appreciate the quality of their experience and trying to set those intentional boundaries. And I'm really hopeful that that will inform whatever the future workplace is. And I think I'm really excited to see that tech is embracing that in a way that, allows them just to make kind of human focused decisions. And, of course, the folks that need to get back to the office for specialized, tools or access to resources that are not easily replicable at home. Of course, we need to focus on safety, but I think it's this idea that it's more of a sort of policy-driven, human-focused sort of shift to really kind of wait and see.
So let me ask you, we recently held, the CoreNet Eastern chapters held the great debate of 2020 on what this new way of working means. And one concept that kept rising is activity-based working or distributed workforces. It's kind of, is this a sea change in how we work? Can you talk a little bit about results from your surveys or even your own observations on how not just the work environment, the workplace and the workspace, but how people actually work might change in time as we prepare to return to normalcy?
Yeah, that's a big sort of, unknown crystal ball question. And I think it really goes back to that idea of authorship and choice and control over environments. It's really hard to take that away once people have experienced that sort of control over their life, honestly. And so, I think that is going to shift, that there are going to be, activities that are better suited at home. And there are going to be other things that are better suited at the office. And, that's going to look differently for different companies, just depending on what they're about, their goals are. But we know that sort of on a human level, that this choice and control and this license over how you get your work done is probably here to stay. People are just kind of really enjoying that, more than anything else. And so, I think that partnered with this idea that there is still this understanding that the workplace is important and that, we need a place to get together to really collaborate in a way that's going to support innovation, but also to really have that cultural, kind of hallmark of a company, that's going to be really central. And so I think in a way, it's almost going to amplify the experience in each of these different places. So it becomes this network of places that people can go for different things. But I think it's the way that our mindset will shift, that when I'm at home doing work, I'm really productive because set up my environment to do that. If I'm going to the office, I'm, really productive in a different way because I've made the intentional choice to go to that place. So I think just this idea of being intentional and having a variety of places, it's just going to require, more communication, which I think we've all gotten a lot more used to, of just really checking in with teams and, almost to a fault, right, with Zoom fatigue and all of that being very real. But yeah, I think it's just kind of, really leaning into what makes people their best and finding the right places to support that. And the companies that do that, I think, are going to really, the employees are really going to value it and see, that they're really being invested in as people, trusted.
So this is something that we've been also talking about a lot in the CoreNet community. And this is the increased involvement of the HR stakeholders, CHRO, the increased involvement of more enterprise alignment in these decision-making exercises where real estate, facilities, human resources, finance are all coming together to really problem solve at the corporate level. Can you tell our audience a little bit about, you've got these great survey results. How do you translate and communicate some of these findings to a group that may not have a background in space and occupancy planning, workplace strategy, and real estate? So are you working with HR and other groups more than before? And then if you can expand on that and tell us a little bit about how you have those conversations and bring everybody together to the table.
Yeah, yeah, I'm absolutely seeing that. The HR, chief people officer, all of those sorts of roles are definitely being engaged in the process. And to be honest, I don't know that the presentation method is all that different, in terms of engaging them. It's really about, because it is so much about people. I think they get it, and really see the value in these things. It's a much easier sell, these kind of conversations about investing in people and well-being. Because they're the ones that have probably been advocating for that, more quietly the whole time. So yeah, it's really great to see those roles represented at the table, and this actually kind of leads me into one of the points that you had made in kind of introducing this discussion about those fundamentals, that we really think are anchoring, just good workplace strategy. And so this kind of makes me think of how our current shared experience can be thought of as riding a series of waves. You've got the work from home wave, you've got the reentry to the office, and then the third wave of reimagining the workplace of the future. And we're all trying to navigate those waves and figure out what that means to us as consultants and partners, but also to organizations. But instead of three, waves with these, energies, separate energies, we want to think of it as a continuum instead. Work from home will always be present, just like it was a part of the workplace landscape in some form before the pandemic. And perhaps going forward, it may be a little bit higher, just kind of like that network of places I was talking about. But there will still need to be that, physical office to bring us together. And, so since this moment is all about graphs, you can kind of think of the work from home curve flattening, but still staying present. And so not being a separate wave that has a start and stop. But on top of that, instead of these sort of two phases of reentry and sort of what the future workplace, but those things are connected on a continuum. And I think it's interesting to have this kind of connectedness, because if we're only focused on safety, which is really important, and like I mentioned, kind of getting those people back that need to be back, but it could potentially disengage those that are looking to return to the office for the fellowship and all of the social connection that people are missing the most. And so, kind of leaning more into this approach that I mentioned that the tech companies that we're working with are embracing, taking this more cautious kind of human-focused approach, it's a real opportunity to embrace design thinking and use that re-entry phase to prototype change that can build a company's unique future, not to, guess at the sort of one size fits all. So what we've been able to do with companies is actually explore those future scenarios and co-create those solutions with organizations, including the HR, leaders in those conversations, and kind of really coming up with what the solutions are for that company's unique needs. And it's kind of a refreshing thought to sort of imagine, what if the workplace could address the inefficiencies that we maybe were ignoring, or could it strengthen our company culture when people do come back? Like really kind of pushing beyond what the immediate safety concerns are, and having the diverse set of voices, and stakeholders from the client is really important in getting at, sort of all angles of that exploration.
So I know that this concept of fellowship, community, of social connections has been a theme throughout our conversations. And that's obviously a big part of what CoreNet's all about. HGA has been a loyal annual sponsor for the Mid-Atlantic chapter for a long time. We're so grateful for that. Can you talk a little bit about, outside of each of our professional responsibilities, what an organization like CoreNet has done for you, and what CoreNet has done for HGA in keeping community together in this time of uncertainty?
Yeah, CoreNet has been an organization that we continue to support and love to support because of the amazing client relationships that we've built. And we really get a lot of value from all of the programming and special events. Even touch points like this, go a long way.
Well, and that's great. And that's something that we're looking to do, is that blend of education and information and connection, right? All those things that bring CoreNet together. And we're going to make sure to leave a few minutes at the end, because we've got lots of questions coming in. And for those of you in the audience, you'll see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you want to add your question there, you can also put a comment to the entire audience, to the speakers, or you can post your question in chat. Either one, we're going to pick them up. But before we get into Q&A, I wanted to get to know Haley, the person. So can you share with us when we're able to travel again, what is your next dream trip? Where would you go?
Oh, you know, I have been fortunate to travel to some amazing places, and I have definitely been missing that, you know, planning the next vacation. I'm itching to go somewhere, but really high on our list is to visit Portugal. Just the architecture, the coastline, it looks amazing, and I do love a good glass of ruby port. So.
What a trip, and great seafood, right? Excellent food. Oh, that's excellent. That gets all of us daydreaming about being able to travel again. So let's get into some questions. So I'm going to take a look here. I know we've got a few that have posted. So let me just check here. All right, we've got one about your research. So how can your research findings be applied to our members right now? And remember, our audience is a blend of service providers, end users, lots of different types of organizations. What are you learn right now about the findings from that research report from HGA?
Yeah, you know, the more findings we all bring to this conversation, the more we're learning about people, and all the reports and surveys really give us a broadened perspective. So, you know, I think we've always talked about designing for flexibility or trying to predict the way business may change, but, you know, no one would have predicted this, you know, such a large scale shift in how we get work done. So I think the best application of the findings from our research, and really anyone else is to really just deepen our curiosity, deepen our commitment to the big conversations happening around us. You know, health and well-being, I think, has really gotten a spotlight shown on it because of our current situation. But I think it's also really empowering to kind of use design to tackle larger conversations around equity and inclusivity, social justice, and organizational resilience, you know, and sort of scenario planning for the future. It's a real opportunity to use this research just to broaden the perspective and have those deeper conversations.
That's interesting, and I wonder, I think that might surprise a few members of our audience. And what surprised you the most about these survey results when you got, you know, all this data back and had a chance to really sift through it? Any surprises, any aha moments?
Yeah, you know, the one thing I had mentioned earlier about the quality insight was surprising to me in a good way, of just that people did recognize the fact that they were, you know, able to unplug and not feel guilty. I was actually surprised at how many people said that they felt guilty taking a break at the office.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's really intuitive in a way when you think about it that you do feel, you know, still on. But that was surprising to me, just as sort of a side note. But then the whole conversation around this idea of membership and kind of this exclusive club forming, you know, anytime that we can kind of get a peek into the human experience in that way is really fascinating to me.
No, that's great. And I think that's, you know, this is going to continue to change and continue to surprise, right? That's one thing we know. So let me ask you this. We do have a few minutes left. And again, anyone in the audience, we encourage you to keep this conversation going. Drop your questions in either chat or Q&A. We will be posting this conversation on the CoreNet Mid-Atlantic website, and we also have links on LinkedIn. The other thing we can do that's been really effective is when we repost on LinkedIn, we keep the conversation going in comments, and we'll include links, contact information for Haley, links to accessing the survey result, Mid-Atlantic local contacts, all that will be on LinkedIn. But let's get back a few minutes left. I have a question for you, and then we'll see if the audience has anything they'd like to add. So you did spend a lot of time here in Washington, D.C., and you were obviously here in a time when we were in a different economic place. What did you learn about working here in this Mid-Atlantic region that you've been able to apply to working on the West Coast in a very different sort of corporate culture style and way of working? Can you talk a little bit about how working and living in the Mid-Atlantic prepared you for the rest of your journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I think every part of my journey, you know, builds upon the next. And my time in DC, you know, I really spent a lot of time working with associations and law firms, which makes up so much of the workplace market. And, you know, it was really interesting just in how in some ways, we kind of group those into big buckets, like, oh, all our law firms are the same, or all associations, are kind of treated the same. But really understanding this sort of unique nuance of each of those different organizations, because I think kind of a similar thing when, kind of jumping to the West Coast of like tech being a big, umbrella. And there's a lot of work that we're doing in entertainment and content production and media, and so there's a lot of these kind of big umbrella, kind of terms that we put around, and I think just kind of almost debunking that in a way of really getting to know, the importance of getting to know that specific organization is able to just bring, that kind of thoughtfulness, to not sort of relying on benchmark data of a group of things, right? Like it's kind of getting beyond that, getting to a more granular, level. And I think, my experience with that in DC really set me up for, success of kind of bringing that same approach that, just because somebody else is doing it because they're, a peer company doesn't make it right for that next company.
So, that lesson may be ever more relevant right now when there is no one size fits all. That's something that was clear as we talked through the results of your survey, how you're having those conversations with clients. So we're coming to the end of our conversation here. I want to remind everybody that we can continue the Q&A on LinkedIn is really the best place to do it. So watch the CoreNet Mid-Atlantic chapter's LinkedIn page, and we'll keep the dialogue going with Haley and her wonderful colleagues from HGA. On behalf of all of us in the CoreNet Mid-Atlantic chapter, we are so grateful to have had you here today. Loved the conversation, loved getting to know you better. And again, if you have any last words for us, we're going to close up in just 60 seconds, but any last words of wisdom before we say goodbye for them?
Oh, I don't know about wisdom, but thank you so much for hosting me. It was so great to have this conversation with you and just to connect back with the Mid-Atlantic. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we miss you, and we can't wait to follow the next chapter and see what's next on your radar. So thank you again.
Great. Thanks so much.